And so I went down. At the airport, all the cab drivers were black. I got in a cab driver, a black guy. He drove me all over, showed me all around Memphis and everything. And then finally, we went to Beale Street, which I was this looked like a rundown street in the black section. And then we came up to the Lorraine Motel, and I checked in there. And I got there, as Claude had said, a couple days earlier. I think I got there on a Tuesday night. And I was very stunned that this little motel was just packed. They had a little restaurant in the back. It was packed, jukebox, fried fish, and I stayed there really late into the night. But all the crowd was beginning to gather because the word was out. Dr. King's coming. Dr. King's going to be staying here. So everybody was coming for whatever reasons, and it was terrific. And the next day, indeed, Dr. King arrived, and I didn't know any of these people. I didn't know Dr. King. I knew of him, but I didn't know him or any of his people, and I met them all for that next day. Hosea Williams, Jesse Jackson, Andrew Young, Bernard Lee, all of Dr. King's inner circle.
Ralph David Abernathy.
Yes, of course, Reverend Abernathy. I met them all that next day, and for the first time I ever got to see King up close. I mean, he was a sharp dresser. He was just he was so young. And the thing of it is, he's like a rock star. I mean, he got out the car and people were hollering and everybody's out on the balcony, and it was like a really big deal. And I'm pressing to try to get my little interview and stuff, and Dr. King gave me an interview, and I talked with him that afternoon, and it was a funny thing. After we had finished our conversation in the room, it was just he and I and Ralph Abernathy and Reverend Abernathy, and afterwards we came out onto the balcony, and he stood there for a long time. The two of us stood there in the balcony, where he would get killed almost to the minute at the same hour the next day. And while we're standing there on the balcony talking, he begins to ask me about my personal life, how I got into the newspaper, what it was like being a reporter at the New York Times. And he mentioned you. He said that he had been in New York, and he said Gerald Fraser had gone around with him, covered him while he's in New York. And so I had to get my story. He said, we'll talk again tomorrow, because we didn't have a chance to go through everything. We'll talk again tomorrow. I ran down to my room, wrote up my little story, and filed it. The night was coming up a big storm. And nobody, King, Jesse, nobody told me there was going to be a big rally that night, which turned out to be a very historical moment, for that's where King made his mountaintop speech. Well, nobody told me, and it was this fierce storm. I mean, that old motel was just like it was lightning and thunder. It was like, oh. They tell me later at the church, the shutters were rattling and everything. Well, at that motel, whew, I had my door bolted. I never left that motel grounds that night. Didn't go to that. The next day, of course, everybody's talking about King. Had a premonition of death and all these things. And I'm trying to get to King right away, and I can't get to him. And the day is getting away from us. And so what I did is I wrote a B matter. You know, I wrote a story of background material, everything I had, and I filed that to New York. And I figured once I can get King, I can put my new top on it. And it's getting later and later and later. And Dr. King is very busy. They were trying to have another march. It was going to be in a couple days, and his people were all arguing in court. The city had got an injunction, said you can't march, and King said he's going to march in the face of the injunction, and so they were battling this out. And as it happened, my interview got lost, and I couldn't get a phone line to phone that top piece of that story to New York, because there's an old little switchboard over there in the motel. And so what happened was I was talking about in the room, the deadline was coming. It was 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock New York time, and I'm stalking about in the room, and there was a housekeeper whose name, I met the woman later, her name was Ceola Shavers. she was crossing the balcony there, and she dropped a bottle off a tray. It broke right outside my door, and I thought it was a rifle shot. I ran out there, and I looking all sheepishly to see her up there, and she's. But I was missing my deadline, and as I said, I was in my rookie year at the paper. You can't miss the deadline, and I had left the door open, and I took off my trousers. I'm stalking about, smoking cigarettes, and I heard what I thought was a bomb blast, and I rushed to the door, and there's no evidence any bombing or anything, and I see this fellow directly across the street, which I've talked about in the bushes, and this car roars up to the door, and I noticed this guy driving the car. I recognize him. He's Dr. King's chauffeur. And he finally, the car stops in almost directly in front of my room, and I run out there in my shorts. So what happened? What happened? And the guy starts banging his head on the steering wheel. He's, oh, no. And then I noticed these voices. I heard these people earlier. I thought they had set off a firecracker maybe. And all of a sudden there was this wailing sound came from their voices. And I'm out there in the parking area, and then I look up and I see Dr. King was down on the balcony. So I ran back in and put on my clothes and ran down there with the rest of them. And then I ran, and then the police charged through while we were there. I thought it was the police shooting us, and I threw up my hands at the cops. And then I ran up to the balcony, and I saw Dr. King. Could see his horrible wounds, huge, bigger than your fist, in his jaw and neck. And I ran off the balcony, and then I ran down. There was a payphone, which I knew was down the hall down that little alleyway behind the restaurant. I ran down there, and then I phoned New York, and I actually had a lead on everybody, all the news media in the country, on the kind of story where you don't even get a break on. So that was indeed the biggest story I ever had.